It's pretty nice that XNet supports so many data concepts right out of the box. But what happens if you need to capture a few key fields on something like a subject, and those fields aren't represented in XNet? Does that mean that you need to code up a brand new data type to support them? Fortunately, no. There's an easy way to do this in XNet using custom variables. Because XNet data types are defined in XML, we can apply more XML to modify the schema and add support for fields. And even better, we can do this in the UI without requiring a server restart. But before I get into a demonstration of how to do this, I do need to mention that there are some positives and negatives associated with using custom variables in XNet, and the negatives can be pretty gnarly. So keep that in mind as we go through the demo, and we'll break them down at the end. To start out with, let's consider a scenario that's complex but realistic. In our subject pool project, which supports a clinical trial center, we've got some subject data that we'd like to capture that isn't supported natively in XNet. We'll have a set of internal tracking fields that is only appropriate to keep in our internal subject tracking project. And we have some additional demographic data that would be appropriate to share with every other study that uses these subjects. We can use our custom variables to define two different variable sets that we can share or not share as appropriate. Let's log in and I'll show you how it's done. I'm logging in as the Bogus Coordinator user who has project owner permissions on the subject pool project. Let's go to that project. To add custom variables, let's click on the Manage Custom Variables button. There is some language on this page talking about project protocols, but we can largely ignore that. Let's go to the data type selector and select subjects. We're going to add two custom variable sets, one that will be shared across projects and one that won't. First, you're prompted to name your custom variable set. Let's call this first one Bogus Internal, and make sure that the project-specific checkbox is checked. Then we'll have an opportunity to add fields and define the properties for those fields. We'll add fields for payment tracking and for an internal reference number. Payment amount, which will store decimal values, should be formatted as a float. Payment date should be formatted as a date. And then bogus ID can be formatted as a string, which would allow for letters and numbers. Now let's add a second custom variable set and call it Bogus Shared, and make sure that the project-specific checkbox is not checked. We're going to track some additional subject demographics here. We could track some serious things, but just for fun, let's track hair length and color. Our hair length measurement could be a float or an integer, depending on how precise we want to be in our measurement. And then hair color can be a string, and we can predefine a number of enumerated options. When we're done adding variable sets, we click Done to return to the project page. Now we can edit a subject, and we can add values to these fields. You'll notice that the XNet UI gives you different input types based on how you configure your variables to guide users to entering proper values. So our hair length is a typical text field. And then our hair color gives us a selector to pick from our new enumerated options. Once we save those values, we can see them reflected in this space here between the traditional metadata and where the experiments associated with the subject are displayed. This display area here is common for all custom variables and all data types. We can see here that this subject is used in the bogus NS study and the bogus MTXV study. Let's switch over to the bogus NS study, see what we see. You can see here that these additional custom variables are not being displayed yet. That's because we haven't enabled them in the project yet. You can see that we can only select the variable types that have been shared across multiple projects. Now we can see these new custom variables in our subject listing and on the subject report page as well, but only the demographics that we set to be shared. The variables that were private to the subject pool project are kept hidden.